I think it's important to be clear that social equity was created by white men, for white men, about non-white people. Let's just let that sink in for a minute, because the thing that happens inside of social equity is that it doesn't take into account the sentiment analysis of Black people, because it was not for that. And so as a result, we're unable to detect whether or not it's working or not working. I would like to pull back, and I think at some point, starting now and in the near future, we need to have a very clear, lucid conversation, discussion, and some action around what are the metrics in place to determine that social equity has not worked and may not need to exist anymore, and another system comes into place. Because if you don't do that, like for example, a question that comes to my head as I'm listening to the conversation, and I try to listen, intently, is that at what point did people realize that apartheid was apartheid? What metrics did they use? Was there a percentage of ownership that they looked at or ignored? But the reality is, the answer to that question is too late. And the numbers had to be 90-something%, just like social equity is performing at this point. And so there's a nature to racism and a racist system that makes it very, very dangerous. And that's its ability to obscure its detection, also to interfere with data collection and the quality of data around it. And so that it can literally make you discuss it and not be able to discuss it from any other lens. So as we look at social equity and how it's played out, is that social equity keeps getting discussed as there is no other way to create, ownership in cannabis for Black people, except that we talk about it through social equity. And I'm telling you that if the fact that it can respond, that means that racism or that system is sentient. And if it's sentient, it's obscuring the way we discuss it. Even in our conversation now, if we're not careful, it will make us talk about it as though there is no other way, there's no imagination on the planet Earth to arrive at Black people having ownership, deserved ownership in this industry. It'll make us think that diversity and inclusion is the same as social equity. It'll make us hear 96% of ownership of 35,000 cannabis licenses nationwide from 33 seemingly or appearing autonomous states awarding that to white men. We'll hear that and not be able to function correct. And we'll still talk about social equity as though it has a chance. It'll make us watch as this thing rolls out, legalization for the last 10, 11, 12 years, and everywhere except where, our sister is, social equity, if and when it showed up, it was on average 7 to 10 years late.
Right.
We'll discuss it like it's a real viable option, and quite honestly, it may not be. It may not be. I don't think it's inconceivable that the people who were wounded the most from this are actually the metric of how this thing should be designed. And being very honest and very straightforward, I don't think that people outside of our culture, specifically anyone else but Black people, can design a system that is going to be sensitive and affect us correctly, or it will be designed and created and it'll arrive too late and give everyone else first movers advantage. And we still will be discussing this a year from now as though it is a viable solution. So what I think should take place is that everywhere that it has started late, that is the scorecard for us saying it needs to end as it's been presented. We need to redo that idea and be open to the fact that it may possibly not even be called social equity. It may be called something else that we conceive. Because in every society, if you look at the sentiment analysis, if you check in with Black people and how they're being affected, then you're going to know exactly if it's effective or not, unless that is actually the way that you designed it to play out.
And one thing.
So let me ask you, look, Toy. I know you got so much. I know. So I'm gonna ask you a question and go into Toy. So just make sure for clarification purpose. So it is the desired outcome of what we were supposed to happen is where the frustration or maybe the redesigning, imagining the redesigning should come into play, because the outcome of what we want to see has not happened. It has not met the bar that we were looking for. Is that what you're saying? It hasn't met the bar.
It hasn't met the bar because we were not the designers of it. And so that's why I said it's like a sci-fi thing that takes place when we'd have this discussion, because we could on 6 of our 5 fingers name right off industries that all play out this same way because of our inability to craft the right language, and all these euphemisms take place, and then at the end we're left scratching our head, oh my God, how did that happen? So that's why I said, at what point did the people recognize apartheid to be apartheid? In fact, apartheid was apartheid before it was called apartheid. Had they checked with the South African, he would have told you, this is apartheid. So now they're checking with us now. We're on these conference calls, having these conversations about social equity, and we cannot stop it, except that we may have to pump the brakes and say, hey, this is apartheid. It's the same numbers if we do the stats. We're living in apartheid right now in America under the auspices of social equity. It's just a cooler phraseology, and it's more hip, so that it sounds social and it sounds equitable, and everywhere it's played out, it hasn't been equitable. 10 years, 7 to 10 years, Colorado just 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Just 2 weeks ago, in an already crowded space of well-funded, AKA white men, organizations that have the licenses, how can you start with no money just because you Black and you went to jail and now you got a license? Are you doing me a favor for real? What's sociable and what's equitable about that?